Sometime in 1994, in a garage in Silicon Valley, a 37-year-old engineer named Jeff Hawkins picked up a scrap piece of lumber and began to carve. He shaped it to fit his shirt pocket, roughly 4 3/4 inches long, then whittled a chopstick into a stylus. For the next several months, he carried this block of wood everywhere he went, pulling it out in meetings and tapping on it as though he were checking his calendar or scheduling a lunch. His colleagues watched with a mixture of amusement and concern. What they were actually watching was the birth of the smartphone. That piece of wood is now behind glass at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, catalog number WAND-027166262, and the company that grew from it would be valued at $53 billion on a single afternoon in March 2000, then sold for less than 1/50th of that figure a decade later. How did a man with a block of wood and a chopstick build the most valuable tech IPO of the dot-com era, and how did he lose it? You're watching American Electronics and Tech Channel, where we take apart the companies that built the electronic world, down to the circuit board and the engineer who designed it. If that's your kind of story, subscribe and hit like, because this rise was built on a block of wood, and the fall was built on everything that came after. Jeff Hawkins was born in 1957 in Huntington, New York, and grew up near Jacobson Shipyard in a family that spent its spare time designing and building boats. He earned a degree in electrical engineering from Cornell in 1979 and took a job at a small Silicon Valley firm called Griddy Systems, where he helped develop the JaridPad, one of the first tablet computers ever produced. It was an engineering achievement and a commercial failure, too large and too expensive for the market it was meant to serve. But the failure planted something. Hawkins became convinced that the future of personal computing was not on a desk or in a briefcase. It was in a pocket. And every device that tried to be a shrunken laptop would fail in the hands of ordinary people. By the early 1990s, the idea of a personal digital assistant was in the air, but no one had built one that worked. Apple was investing tens of millions into the Newton, a device more famous for its mocked handwriting recognition than for anything it accomplished. The market was littered with expensive wreckage. Into that gap walked a man who had already failed once and intended to fail differently. In January 1992, Hawkins founded Palm Computing and recruited Donna Dubinsky and Ed Colligan to help build the company. Their first project was not a device, but software. Palm wrote the applications for the Zoomer, a PDA manufactured by Casio, and sold by Tandy at $599. The Zoomer was slow, overloaded with features, and designed by a committee of 4 companies pulling in 4 directions. It sold roughly 20,000 units. Apple's Newton, launched the same year, moved about 80,000 and was still considered a disaster. Every PDA on the market was proving the same point, and the point was grim. The category appeared to be dying. Palm survived on fumes, selling its graffiti handwriting recognition software to other manufacturers. Investor Bruce Dunleavy, watching Hawkins criticize every device on the market, finally issued a challenge. If you know what consumers want, why don't you go and build it yourselves? They did. Hawkins retreated to his garage, and this is where the story returns to the block of wood in full. His failure at GRID had burned one principle into him permanently: size kills. Every PDA that flopped was too large, too heavy, and attempted too much. So he measured his own shirt pocket, carved a piece of wood to fit, and began the strangest product test in Silicon Valley history. He taped paper sleeves onto the wood to simulate different application screens. He whittled a chopstick for a stylus. And for months, he carried the block around, pulling it out at lunch, tapping on it in meetings, pretending to schedule appointments on a piece of lumber while his colleagues stared. He was not testing technology. He was testing human behavior. And the insight that emerged was radical in its simplicity. A pocket computer needs exactly 4 functions: a calendar, an address book, a to-do list, and a memo pad. Nothing more. But Palm had the money to design such a device, and not enough to manufacture it. In 1995, modem manufacturer US Robotics acquired Palm for $44 million, giving Hawkins the production line he needed. In March 1996, Palm launched the Pilot 1000 at $299, half the price of Apple's Newton. It offered 128 kilobytes of RAM, a Motorola Dragon Ball processor running at 16 megahertz, a monochrome touchscreen, and two 800AA batteries that lasted for weeks. It did four things and nothing else. Venture capitalists in Silicon Valley openly doubted that consumers would pay for a device with so few features. They were wrong. The Pilot sold roughly 1 million units in its first 18 months, a record for any computing device at the time. Where Apple had tried to teach a computer to read human handwriting and failed, Hawkins had inverted the problem entirely. Graffiti taught the user to write in simplified single strokes the machine could recognize instantly. The user adapted to the computer, and the computer rewarded them with speed and reliability that nothing else on the market could touch. The Pilot 1000 proved what the block of wood had always promised. A pocket computer did not need to be a shrunken laptop. It needed to do four things perfectly and then get out of the way. But the company that proved this would not be allowed to enjoy it for long. In 1997, networking giant 3Com acquired US Robotics, and Palm became a subsidiary buried inside a corporation that did not fully understand what it owned. The dot-com boom was inflating every tech stock in the country. Microsoft launched a competing PDA platform, initially calling it Palm PC until Palm sued and forced a rebrand to Pocket PC. The PDA wars had begun, and Palm held the high ground, with 70,000 third-party developers writing software for Palm OS against roughly 200 building for the Windows side. But 3Com refused to spin Palm off as an independent company, and the cost of that refusal was enormous. In 1998, Hawkins, Dubinsky, and Colligan, the three people who had built Palm from a block of wood and a rented office, walked out the door and founded a rival company called Handspring, licensing Palm's own operating system to build competing devices. The company that made Palm had let the people who made Palm leave. It kept the software, the market share, and the brand, and assumed those would be enough. On March 2, 2000, Palm went public on the NASDAQ. Shares were priced at $38. By midday, they hit $165. They closed at $95, giving Palm a market capitalization of $53 billion, more than General Motors, more than McDonald's, and more than 3Com itself, which still owned 94% of it. Over 37 million shares changed hands on a single day. A year earlier, Palm had released the device that captured the wider culture. The Palm Vive, designed by the California firm IDEO, was housed in anodized aluminum, weighed 4 ounces, and measured less than half an inch thick. It carried a rechargeable lithium-ion battery in an era when every competitor ran on disposable ATAs. The Palm Vive did not look like a trade show gadget. It looked like something from a design museum, and the Smithsonian's Cooper Hewitt acquired one for exactly that reason. Revenue hit $563 million, up 400% in 4 years. 70% of every PDA sold in America carried the Palm name. Meanwhile, the founders who had walked away were building something even more consequential at Handspring. Using Palm's own licensed operating system, they launched the Trio in early 2002, a device that combined a phone, a touchscreen, a keyboard, email, and web browsing in a single pocket-sized object. By any honest measure, the Trio was the blueprint for the modern smartphone. In 2003, Palm acquired Handspring, and the founders came home. The Trio became Palm's flagship. The smartphone, as a consumer category, existed because Palm had proved it could. But the operating system running underneath these celebrated devices had not been substantially rewritten in years. Palm OS was designed for a world of 4 functions and monochrome screens, and the company that should have been rebuilding it from the ground up was instead splitting itself into 2 separate entities, Palm One for hardware and Palm Source for software. Palm was reorganizing when it should have been reinventing. The next threat was already visible, and Palm's chief executive would greet it by laughing. In November 2006, Ed Colligan stood at a Churchill Club breakfast in Silicon Valley and fielded a question about the persistent rumor that Apple was building a phone. His response entered the permanent record of American business misjudgment. "We've learned and struggled for a few years here figuring out how to make a decent phone," he said. "PC guys are not going to just figure this out. They're not going to just walk in." 2 months later, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and introduced the iPhone. The entire handheld industry became a museum exhibit overnight. Palm scrambled. The company hired John Rubinstein, the Apple veteran who had led the creation of the iPod, and brought in Matias Duarte, a Chilean-American interface designer whose previous work on the Danger Sidekick had already shaped how a generation interacted with mobile devices. Together, they built WebOS, an entirely new operating system with card-based multitasking, gesture navigation, and a visual language that reviewers called the most elegant mobile interface on the market. The Palm Pre, the phone built to carry WebOS, launched in June 2009 exclusively on Sprint, the third largest wireless carrier in the country. The reviews praised the software. The App Store was nearly empty. The carrier reach was too narrow. Whether the failure was a matter of distribution, timing, or the accumulated cost of a decade spent polishing an aging platform, instead of building a new one, is a question honest observers can answer more than one way. On April 28, 2010, Hewlett-Packard announced it would acquire Palm for $5.70 per share, an enterprise value of approximately $1.2 billion. A company valued at $53 billion on its IPO day, sold for less than 1/50th of that number. HP said it wanted WebOS for everything. Then, the people who had built WebOS began to leave. Matias Duarte, the designer whose interface work had been the finest thing about Palm's final years, departed within weeks and became user experience director for Android at Google, where he would design Honeycomb and Material Design, shipping the ideas he built at Palm to billions of devices under someone else's name. Peter Skillman, vice president of design, left for Nokia. The creative core of WebOS walked out, and HP, like 3Com before it, let them go. HP launched the touchpad tablet in July 2011. 49 days later, HP killed it, with Best Buy reportedly holding over 240,000 unsold units. CEO Leo Apotheker discontinued all WebOS hardware. In February 2013, HP sold the operating system to LG Electronics for an undisclosed sum. LG used it to power smart televisions. The Palm brand was eventually sold to TCL, a Chinese manufacturer, which in 2018 released a small Android phone bearing the Palm name and nothing else that Palm had ever made. $53 billion, then $1.2 billion, then an undisclosed figure, then a licensed name on an imported phone. The math tells the story without commentary. WebOS runs today on millions of LG televisions worldwide. Every time you swipe a notification away on an Android phone, you are using a gesture that Matias Duarte first designed at Palm. The card-based multitasking, the swipe to dismiss, the fluid navigation that defines the modern smartphone experience, all of it traces back to a team in Sunnyvale that built an interface for a company that could not survive long enough to ship it to the world at scale. The Pilot 1000 pattern sells today in the collector market for $35 to $200. Enthusiast communities still write new software for Palm OS hardware, decades after the company vanished. The block of wood sits in its glass case at the museum, and the shape Jeff Hawkins carved from that scrap of lumber, a touchscreen rectangle that fits in a shirt pocket, is the shape of every phone on Earth, that block of wood. When Hawkins carved it in his garage, he was asking the simplest question in product design. What fits in a pocket? He answered it. Palm answered it. The Pilot answered it. The Treo answered it. WebOS answered it. Every phone in every pocket on Earth is still answering it. But Palm's name is on none of them. Palm did not lose the smartphone. Palm invented the smartphone, proved every assumption, built the blueprint, and handed it away one piece at a time until there was nothing left to hand. If you owned a Palm, a Pilot, a Trio, or a Pre, or if you worked at Palm and watched the future walk out the building one designer at a time, drop a comment below. Tell us the model, the year, and whether it still powers on. The people who built these machines and the people who loved them know more about what was lost than the people who sold it. Subscribe, because this archive is still being built.